And thank you all. We are entering the final piece of our evening. We hope you'll stick around for just a little bit longer. We've heard a lot about Granny D just now and over the course of these 2 days. But now is a time which means a lot to us as an organization, Open Democracy, the organization she founded. Because although we've got our staff and we've got our board and we do our thing day by day, none of it would be possible without a lot of people who participate in this movement and who have volunteered countless hours. And this is a chance for us to honor some of them. But to do so, in the spirit of Granny D, we wanted to share 7 minutes of reflections from people who knew her well and who were inspired by her. So a short video, and then a short presentation of Granny D Awards, and then we'll bid you good night, unless you want to stay for the Republican debate. You can watch that here. So let's get that video going, and we'll present the Granny D Awards.
Just you put one foot. If you think you want to make a difference and move on to something new ahead, just you put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be doing just what Granny D has said. Whoa, whoa. If you want to get folks all together.
And I have to say that she has been an influence in that not only is she kind of a sort of spiritual leader for us all, a kind of muse, inspiration, but I think she also makes me feel, anyway, that our efforts really are very, very possible. If an 88-year-old woman can walk across the country, garner national attention, what can a larger movement do? And I believe that we can really accomplish something here, and it's largely due to that grand old lady.
I think she served as a reminder to me that fixing this entrenched and broken system is really about individual contact with other people and building a movement from below, and that it's not going to happen from above, and that means getting out and being with real people the way Granny D did, and organizing a mass movement to get money out of politics.
I guess I was kind of a regular high school kid when Granny D walked into my life, and she spoke at commencement about this issue of campaign finance reform and about walking across the country. She was over 90 years old, and that made a pretty big impression. And in the years after that, I had the opportunity to march with her a couple times, to speak with her many times, to watch her get arrested in the U.S. Capitol, fighting for campaign finance reform. And I figured if she, a little over 5 feet tall, over 90 years old, could take up this fight, I, in my 20s, certainly had to do my part.
I'll tell you about how I first heard about Granny D. It's Christmas of 1999, and I'm in the living room having a glass of wine before 20 people go into dinner in southwestern Connecticut, and I'm talking to the husband of my partner's niece. His name's Joe Haddock. And somehow we got onto the conversation of reforming our government, and he started to tell me about this crazy grandmother that he had that had this harebrained idea that she was going to walk across the whole country for campaign finance reform, and the family couldn't talk her out of it. And they had raised all kinds of objections. How are you going to do it? Walk 6 days a week, 10 miles a day. Can you do that? Prove it. So she went out and did it, 10 miles a day for a week, and off she went. Well, how are you going to sleep out? I'll just sleep out under the stars. Can you do that? Sure. She hoisted up her sleeping bag and a backpack and hiked 2 days, stayed overnight, and came back. And every time they would try and slow her down, she jumped over. So he said, okay, my job in New York City is building websites for big corporations. I'll build you a website, Granny. And it happened that we were talking 7 days before she began at the Rose Bowl on January 1st. So that's how I met Granny D.
When people ask me how I got involved with Granny D, campaign finance reform, what made me do anything, because after reading her journal, which had been turned into a book with her and Dennis Burke working on it, I could never again say I was too old or it was too late to do something. And she has an incredible way of saying, listen, you either do something that you have a passion for, that you believe in, or if you don't, then those things that you think are harmful, it's just like you've stepped over to their side.
One thing Granny D used to say is, she had this quote, democracy, it's not what you have, it's what you do. And she set an incredible example for how we do democracy, how we treat it as a verb, and get out and put even our lives on the line, as she did over the age of 90, walking and continuing the fight.
He said even more important than campaign finance reform is the fact that she illustrates the power of one. And that old lady said, you're never too old to raise a little hell.
In front of the other, in front of the other, and you'll be doing just what Granny D has done.
Well, and when she spoke, whether it was a written speech or even just off the cuff, she had a certain poise and posture and eloquence that made people sit up and not just listen, but really immediately connect with her in a kind of spiritual and soulful way. But never anyone who really just could draw you in as quickly as Doris could draw you in with her humanity and with her sense of purpose and just her love, basically.
All right. Now we have a proposition here that this is not just about an issue, campaign finance reform, but that this is a movement of people who invest a part of who they are into building this and moving this forward. And although few of us, as Larry Lessig pointed out, will see this over the finish line, all of us get to take steps and to move this ball down the field. And so this is a joy for Open Democracy and the New Hampshire Rebellion to celebrate a few of those people who are, for us, representative of the movement. We could never possibly do justice to everybody who has made their massive contributions, but there are a few people who have gone far above and beyond whom we just have to honor tonight. And so we're going to give 3 sets of awards for national legislative leadership, for grassroots leadership, and a Lifetime Reformer Award. And I will present them along with our board chair, Gordon Allen. And we have other members of the board present who are a critical part of this process. Thank you all. And I'll be joined by some of my team to present the Grassroots Awards. The first award goes to someone who has a lot of other things he could do with his political career. A man not from New Hampshire, but somebody who learned about Granny D and who, when he was first invited to be part of this New Hampshire rebellion, hundreds of miles from his home district, decided to catch a flight up in the middle of winter in January of 2014 and come and walk with the New Hampshire rebellion. I don't know how many years before that he had made the decision that this issue deserved the first place in his legislative priorities. And he applied all of his skills, and we've gotten to witness some of them this afternoon, to making this issue a winning issue in Congress. Congressman John Sarbanes is not just a legislative leader, a practical and intellectual lawmaker, but is somebody who, as we heard this afternoon, truly believes that we must fix this problem first if we are going to have the country, the democracy that we need and that we deserve. And it was moving for me again this afternoon to hear that it isn't just his head but his heart that is in this. And we feel very privileged as a movement to have a leader in Congress who is devoting the time and the energy and traveling the miles and walking the miles for this cause. So for our first National Legislative Leadership Award, Granny D Award, please congratulate with me Congressman John Sarbanes.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it. I admire Granny D at this point just about more than anybody I've ever come to know about. And, you know, I was down in Selma, I mentioned earlier today, with John Lewis. John Lewis, one of the great fighters of the civil rights movement, and we were talking about people like John Lewis, these foot soldiers, people like Fannie Lou Hamer, people like Rosa Parks. I'm absolutely convinced that someday when we get this done, when this movement is ultimately successful, we're going to look back and the foot soldiers of this movement will be people like Dan Weeks, will be people like Larry Lessig, and all of you who stepped up to make this happen. This isn't a movement, Dan. It's the movement. It's the most consequential thing we can do. And I'll close with this to give you some hope. When I came up that time to march, we had a panel, and Larry Lessig convened it, and he talked about a poll that showed that 96% of Americans think that money in politics is a problem. And Larry, that day, was very focused on trying to figure out who are the 4%. Well, and it also showed that 91% think there's nothing we can do about it. Now, Larry was very focused that day on who are the 4% who don't think it's a problem. But we also focus on the fact that there were 5% who think we can do something about it. And when I told that story in Maine, Andy Bossie, who just ran the successful campaign up there to get their public financing systems strengthened, he got all excited. He said, maybe if we win in Maine, that 5% becomes 6% or 7% around the country. And maybe if we win in Seattle, that 7% becomes 10 or 11%. We can do this. We can do this. And we're going to do it because of people like you. Thank you for this great honor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman. And if I may say, part of the joys, one of the exciting experiences of this work is going to Capitol Hill every now and then and requesting meetings with members of Congress. Often, I'm lucky if I get a legislative director. Every now and then I get a member of Congress. When I had the chance to sit down to meet with or reach out to Congressman Sarbanes' office, the congressman who had a million things, no doubt, that he had to do, spent an hour with me talking about how we were going to continue building this movement. And so thank you again for all that you do for this, Congressman. The second National Legislative Leadership Award is presented to someone who isn't here tonight. But you might have heard in Congressman Sarbanes' speech that of the 150-odd co-sponsors of the Government by the People Act, there was one Republican. And there will be more in due course, I have no doubt. But this is a man who I've also had the privilege of getting to know and working with in Washington. A congressman from North Carolina who believes fervently in this issue, in large part out of his personal faith as a Catholic. Congressman Walter Jones believes that it is a moral stain on our nation that some people are more equal than others because they have more money than others. And if you have the chance to look him up online, hear his testimony or the testimony that he will yet give as this issue continues to move in Congress, I think you'll be moved as I have been. And so in absentia, we will be presenting in Washington Congressman Jones. He wanted to be here but could not be here. But let's have a round of applause for Congressman Walter Jones. We do have a pair of state legislative leadership awards, which we will be announcing by press release. The two recipients also wanted to be here, but one is unfortunately sick today. That's State Senator Martha Fuller Clark. And the other is out campaigning on this crazy last weekend. That's State Senator David Pierce. But I'm sure many of you have gotten to know them and work with them. And we will be delivering the awards to them and announcing them in the media soon. And now to present the first Grassroots Leader Award, Brian Bill, our Deputy Director of Open Democracy, the man who makes this tent stand and keeps it warm. Welcome, Brian.
This is a little call and response. You guys are supposed to say, walk on. I didn't build this tent. It takes a movement. It takes people who write letters. It takes people who send emails. It takes people who make phone calls to legislators. It takes people to tweet, whatever that is. It takes people to talk to their neighbors. It takes people who stand at tables at events. It takes people who dress up in costume. It takes people who come in the freezing winter weather at 30 below and walk on. I am proud of each and every person who has taken part in this event and all of the events that have made up the New Hampshire Rebellion. I'm so proud of everybody who's had a part in that. This would not happen. This movement would not happen without the people power. That's what movements are about, and we are just getting started. Yeah. Let me hear a walk on. We have a person among us that exemplifies this can-do attitude, who's done probably all of the above. And I am so proud to announce our first winner tonight of our Grassroots Award, Corinne Dodge. Corinne, in addition to playing her role as Betsy Ross for press conferences and events that we've done over the last couple of years, also made hundreds, maybe thousands of phone calls to legislators to try and get SB 136. Thank you.
136, I remember that part.
Yeah, you're never going to forget that. So I would like to applaud Corinne for all her hard work. Let's give her a round of applause.
Sure, I'll talk. Thank you.
That's it. All right. Be here tomorrow morning because Betsy Ross will be making another appearance and have a few more words to say over breakfast.
And another Grassroots Award to a board member of ours. I can't say enough about Dick Pollock, who unfortunately had to leave earlier today. I was hoping to give it to him. You may have noticed Dick is one of those few people that when, as a board chair, you ask for someone to serve on the board. When I was halfway through my pitch, he said yes. And Dick, and especially that first march, his van was the one that shepherded people around. He arranged stays, and as you may have noticed in the Granny D, at the end of the Granny D video today, that was Dick Pollock that did that. So aside from doing all that logistical stuff and taking thousands of photographs and doing the video, he's just been a tremendous support for us. So we're very pleased to give him. Wish he was here to do it. He's fighting cancer, and best wishes for him.
I am incredibly honored to be presenting our next Granny D Award for grassroots activists. These two come as a pair, and they've been here since the very beginning. Jake and Mary Redwa have walked countless miles with the New Hampshire Rebellion. They've been active with Wolfpack in their own state. They are working with Democracy Spring and Democracy Awakens to plan this next big march. The two of them are an incredible pair, an incredible team, and incredibly committed activists to this cause. They're the kind of people who make me keep wanting to come back. The kind of people who make me probably head down to DC in a couple months. And I'm just incredibly honored to have gotten to know them through this.
Thank you, sir. So
we get a quick picture of you too. Nanny, God. Sweepers. And back over to Brian.
Volunteers who take off of work, paid work, to come and do our work are something special. And we have a woman who has walked and volunteered and made phone calls and sent emails and all those great things. And I would, when Beth Grunwald, my colleague, asked for volunteers to help out, when she couldn't be here, she helped organize a lot of this behind the scenes, but couldn't be here. And she asked Dick Pollock, and she asked, where is she? Kathy, come on up here. Kathy said yes. and has worked tirelessly. Kathy Thorndike has worked tirelessly over the last couple of days, gotten up at the crack of dawn to come down here and help us out, help run this event. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. She has done so much more for this movement, and I thank you so much, Kathy.
All I can say is it's just my honor to be able to be a part of this. Thank you.
And for our final award of the night, this is a first for Open Democracy, but I feel so privileged to give this award in particular. There was a clip of me in the Granny D video recalling how, as a high school kid, I got to meet that crazy old woman who had just finished her cross-country march, and how it did change my life and helped me find my passion and my voice and propelled me on to a career that so far has been everything I could have asked for, dreamed of, and more, in how meaningful it is. But the person who was most important in the walking of that career is somebody who I also met in high school, who had not long before that completed a run for the United States Senate, where he had lost by a whisker, but had run already then in the 90s on a platform that wasn't very popular then, a platform of campaign finance reform. He had finished a career in business, and at a time when he could have easily retired and perfected his tennis swing, and it's still a pretty good tennis swing, he decided instead to devote the next 20 years and counting of his life to building this movement. I met him as a high school kid when he was campaigning for Bill Bradley for president, who also had decided to make this a central issue in his campaign. And when I was at a conference as a freshman in college, a conference about money and politics, I'd already gotten the bug, I heard this person speak, and he was pitching the idea for a new organization that would be solely focused on advancing citizen-funded elections, public funding of federal elections. There were other organizations that were doing great work. Some of them are on the banner. He had been a national board member of Common Cause and had fought to make this their foremost priority, but he believed that we had to have a singular focus on what I think so many in this room have come to believe is the single most important reform that we must pass soon, that he put all he had, including his resources, his time, into starting Americans for Campaign Reform, now Issue 1, one of our partners on the board. I went up to him after that conference and told him, I was a college freshman, I told him I wanted to come back and work for him. And he proudly brought me on as the founding intern, spending long days and nights in his lovely basement in the seacoast of New Hampshire as we set up the first home office, and I would sleep in the room next door of Americans for Campaign Reform, and began to walk, brought Granny D onto the board, and began to try to build this movement in New Hampshire. Many of you know him by now, but it is a real joy and a privilege for me to honor a dear friend and mentor, and somebody who is a role model for me of doing what he doesn't have to do, going far above and beyond these 20 years and counting to advance our cause. So join me in honoring with a Lifetime Reformer Award, John Rauh. And John isn't stopping. He'll be back in D.C. this week, continuing to push Issue 1 to advance this organization. Congratulations, John.
Thank you.
And needless to say, I believe you walked with Granny D.
I did, and so did Mary, absolutely. And it was hot, and she wouldn't stop. She was fantastic. 10 miles a day. She'd go 7 and then stop. Her son, who was driving the van, would give her some water and us. And then she'd go the final 3. Jim, bless his heart, he's no longer alive, never walked an inch. But he was the spirit behind it. Thank you very much, Dan and Gordon, and your board for this high honor. I'm deeply touched. And as you can imagine, having all along the way a partner as Dan, it's been just terrific. I want to take one moment and respect somebody else from New Hampshire, and that's the former Republican Senator Warren Redman. Warren voted against public funding in 1992 as the United States Senator. And when, in 2003, we founded Americans for Campaign Reform, brought on board Bill Bradley, Al Simpson, Bob Kerrey, a group of us from the board went to meet with Warren, and he was not sure. Ladies and gentlemen, he thought it through carefully. And when he called to say, John, I'm with you, he also didn't need to say, but what he did was everything we asked, little or small, Warren was there on this issue, including moving some Republicans with us. So I want to pay respects to the late Republican senator, the superb senator, Warren Redman. Now, that's the past. Let's get going. Okay? The wind is with us. Anybody disagree? The wind is with us. It's time to move this ball across the threshold. We've got great leadership, and Open Democracy just honored one. Congressman John Sarbanes is being a fabulous leader in the United States House and across the country. I have no doubt that this nation will adopt public funding of congressional and presidential elections. The only question is when, and that's up to us. Let's not look back. Let's move forward. Thank you very much.
Well, that concludes our program for today.